Okay, let's try this again. Hello. You might be thinking, why are we playing Black Flag? It's 2020. Specifically, it is December 28th, 2020. We are still playing Black Flag. And I'll tell you why. It's for a variety of reasons. One of them is just simply because Black Flag's just an awesome game. It's one of my favorite games of all time, is Black Flag. It is the end of a console generation. This is a PS3 game. And I played it throughout the entire PS4 generation. And, it's just good. So, we're playing it today just because it's a good game. And also, it's a nice send-off, I guess. Because 2021 will undoubtedly be more focused on PS5, so... While the PS4 is still slightly relevant, let's give it a proper send-off, I guess. But... The other reason why I want to play Black Flag is... for a more personal reason. Other than the fact that it's my favorite game, which is personal in and of itself. But... personal, just... outside of my gaming world. It has to do with my dog, Charlie. And, I'll tell you why that connects in a second. And hopefully in a concise manner. I used to be terrified of dogs. I always thought of myself more as a cat person, just because I met nicer cats than I've met nicer dogs. Dogs would always run up to me and like say hi, it always scared me because I didn't know, I knew that cats bit at people, but cats would never really approach you, like you would have to approach them. At least from my experience at the time. And so, anytime I met a dog, it just immediately scared me. Like, I was always intrigued, but they always seemed a lot more ready than I was to, to, like, engage, and I was just never prepared to talk to a dog, basically. It's so bad that it gets to a point where, my neighbor's dog, who are, like, tiny dogs, I actually don't no idea what kind of dogs they are. I thought they were Chihuahuas. They're kind of like, they have, like, long hair, but they're not Chihuahuas, actually. But they're tiny, like I could kick them. They're so tiny, they're like no bigger than my foot. But it scared me to approach them because like I'd be like taking out the garbage, they'd be out like doing their business, they'd run up to me, and the neighbors would have to like shoo them away because I'd be so terrified that I would just like try to run. It was scary. And maybe it's because when I was really little, my cousin bought a dog. Like, we used to live in the same house with my cousin, and he bought a dog, which is this yappy, untrained mess that would, tear at everything, bite at everything, bark at everything. It was scary. And it was a puppy, so it just wanted to play, but I was a child, so, it scared me. And my memory of that was, like, just trying to trick it to run back into its cage and closing the door on its cage because I did not want to interact with that dog at all. It scared me. But, I would approach the cage and it would just, like, run up and try to bite me again. And I'm like, I kind of hate dogs, actually. I hate dogs. And that's what I lived with for years. Up until 7 years ago, I want to say around March or April. I was just playing video games in the living room, and then the garage door swung open, and out and in walks through this medium-sized dog with like his fur is kind of like patterned the same way that a German Shepherd is. It's got like the black coat at the top with like the orangey brown coat on the sides, and he's got like white paws. It was cute. But he looks up at me, and I look down at him, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And I'm like scared out of my mind. I'm like, You know, I don't like dogs. What's one doing here? Um, it was basically explained to me that this was a friend of a friend's dog, and that they were doing something, so the dog needed to stay here for the night. And I said, have to stay here, you know, like, but it was getting less anxious the more that I interacted with the dog, because the dog has not said a thing once. Like, it hasn't barked at me, it hasn't even tried to sniff me until I was approaching it. But he just seemed more scared. It sounds very cliche, but it really felt like a moment where he was more scared of me than I was of him. And for the first time, I had to be the one to approach the dog, you know. He ended up staying the night in a cage in the living room. He spent a good few hours in the patio room where it was kind of cold. Like, he had blankets in his cage, but like, I felt bad, and so I asked if he could stay in the living room. Like, I always thought dogs were cute, but I wasn't cruel. I wasn't gonna be like, yeah, put him in the patio where, like, put him in the patio room with all the other junk in the cold. Like, the patio room is like an enclosed space, don't get me wrong, but there was no heating in there. But, you know, I wasn't gonna be cruel, and I was like, you know, there's like heating in the living room. Like, at least if he's gonna be in a cage, let him stay in the living room. And so he sat in the living room during his first night, and I remember seeing him that next morning. Like, we took him out of the cage to go, like, you know, let him do his business and all that, and he was just looking up at me. And I remember taking a picture of him, which I still have the picture somewhere, but it's the one picture that I have of Charlie wearing a collar. Because I spent the rest of that day, I went to school, it was like junior year or something, and I spent the whole day thinking about the proposition. It's like, oh, what if we keep the dog? Like, can we just, like, keep the dog? I found out later on that the intention the whole time was to keep the dog. It was just, like, trying to figure out how we would feel about keeping a dog. And, I just couldn't stop thinking about Charlie. I was just, like, in class just thinking about, you know, I think I'm gonna get a dog. It was such a big moment for me. And, I went home that night, and, you know, I saw him, and he was just chilling in the living room, like, ran up at me to say hi. Like, at this point, he had known who I was, and so he came up to say hi to me. And I opened the door to my room, and he ran in and sat on my bed. Like, immediately made himself at home. This is my bed now. This is Charlie's room. You're just living in it. I'm like, okay. And he, and at this point, you know, I feel like I had completely changed my mind on dogs. Because I remember, like, a week later, or maybe 2 weeks later, after having had Charlie in my house, you know, taking the garbage out and having that same interaction with my neighbor's puppies, like, running up at me and you know, like, barking and, like, sniffing at me. But this time I just didn't move and just let the dog sniff at me, because I had been so used to it at this point that it no longer scared me. And then suddenly I was no longer someone who disliked dogs. I was someone who was in fact so in love with dogs that there's a moment, I forget what year, but like I was in Concord or something. I was at the Apple store, or going to the Apple store, and I walked up to this Samoyed to go pet it, and the Samoyed just very gently put its entire mouth around my hand, and I didn't even pull away. I just kind of like, you know, like, oh, I'm sure it's not gonna bite me. I just kind of let it put its entire mouth around my hand like that. The owner was very concerned, like, oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm like, oh, you know, that's my fault. I got in the dog's way. The dog's not like that. I started basically reevaluating the way that I interacted with dogs, and suddenly, I became a dog person. You know, that was just, I lived my whole life. Like, you know, 2013, what? I was like already well into being a teenager. I was already almost on my way out at that point. What? that was like 7 years ago. Yeah, I was like 17 at that point, 16 or 17 at that point. I lived my entire life not being a fan of dogs, and then suddenly this one little dog comes along and just changes my whole outlook on life. It's crazy. And I guess I should get to the point about why we're playing Black Flag. I think one of the earliest memories that I have of Charlie, besides the very first night we met, was the weekend that my sister took my parents to Disneyland with her and left me alone at home with the dog because I had a fever or a flu or something. Like, I was sick, and I didn't want to go in the first place, but on top of that I was sick. And I thought that maybe someone would have stayed home with me to go watch for me, but, you know, they kind of thought, oh, well, he can take care of himself. So it was just me and Charlie for an entire weekend playing Black Flag. And there'd be many moments over the course of 7 years where this would happen, but this is probably the first time that I remember it happening, where it was just me and him alone in the house, just lazing around, not doing anything. Just kind of being together. And it felt nice. And I attribute that memory to Black Flag because obviously I was playing Black Flag, but I also, as much as I do that, I also attribute that memory to Charlie because he was my companion through that time, and it's one of the earliest memories that I can think of where it was just me and him alone. And anytime, you know, because it was me, I didn't have a job. I was just like, I just had school at the time, and my sister had work, my mom had work, and my dad had work, and so I was pretty much only consistently the only person in the house for a majority of the time. So I think we got close together that way. And, you know, it was just a nice moment to share, you know? And I think about I think about our little moments like that a lot, especially these days, knowing that I'm not gonna get any more from him at the very least. I like to think that he was able to live on in spirit through his puppies, you know, because like I do have other dogs. Like, Charlie's not my only dog, but so that kind of helps in a sense, knowing that because of how obsessed I was with posting pictures of my dog, that he gets to live on in memory, but also physically he was able to have puppies, and so there's a bit of him that lives on through them, in a sense.
There's our prey.
But I don't know. It makes me think a lot about how he and I could have spent a little bit more time together, I guess, but we wouldn't have had moments like um, playing Black Flag over the course of a weekend together, or staying home alone at Thanksgiving and having Thanksgiving ham together. And like, it was just literally me and him during Thanksgiving one year, and we had ham, and because no one was around, I gave him some. I'm gonna miss that dog a lot, but I'm sure that later on, oh shit, I'm sure that later on I'll be able to post some sort of video where I can, you know, basically edit down these thoughts in such a way that is more fun to listen to. Because right now I'm a little scattered, but I also don't want to like let these thoughts go before I forget to say them. you know, I also just wanted to post some content just physically with my voice acknowledging the situation because it happened so recently that I want to be and I've said my piece already, and people that I've talked to in real life already know how I feel about the whole thing, and you know, basically basically I wanna I wanna remember him in his life, not in his death. You know, as sad as it is that he passed, I don't want to just constantly think of him as this dog who's no longer around. I want to think about the moments that he was around for. And I like to think that he and I spent a lot of time together just hanging out, that it's enough to last me for as long as it needs to. You know, I don't know what else to say about that. But I guess one thing that I do want to say right now is, you know, I wanna say thank you to Charlie for changing my life in all the different ways he could have in like those 7 years. Just this little dog by himself, just the way that he acted. He was there for me to change my outlook on dogs. First of all, he was there with me through a majority of like what the fuck is up with that bird? Um, he was there with me through like moments where it really felt like I was alone, but he was there with me. You know, he's there with me. He's been there with me through so many different transitions in my life that there are certain things that only me and the dog know. And now that he's gone, I'm like the sole survivor of those secrets, sole keeper of those secrets, and it's it's kind of like it really is like losing your best friend in a way, because Charlie was my best friend. He was there for me for through so many things, whether he wanted to or not. He was always present in my life, and getting used to not having that presence in my life anymore is gonna be a tough transition. But at the end of the day, um, I'm glad that I'm glad just to look at it through a positive light. I'm glad that he no longer has to suffer through his condition, which is what he succumbed to. Basically, he had a heart condition, which basically overtook him, and you know, I hope he knows how much he was loved. If anything, I hope he knows that. I hope he knows at the end of the day that so many people loved him, because it took this dog that was so scared of me for me to take the step forward and show him to not be afraid, you know. And he never ever changed that behavior. Whenever he would meet a new person, he'd be so excited, like he'd be wagging his tail, but he would always wait until they would approach him. Um, he would always wait before he would approach a person, I mean. And he was like that throughout his entire life. And it was really nice seeing people come out of the woodwork to personally say their piece to me about Charlie, because you know that I might be overstating it because of how much Charlie means to me personally, but I like to think that he meant at least a small part in a lot of people's lives at the very least. Like, a small part, but big enough for it to matter that they knew how much the loss of this dog meant, you know? Even people who hadn't, like, seen him in years, uh, still knew of him, you know? And it was nice seeing people acknowledge his existence in that way. Um, there will never really be another dog like Charlie. Um, the confluence of events, maybe his upbringing in a sort of way, because like I got him when he was already full grown. I don't know how old he was by the time we got him, but yeah, he was such a good dog. He was the the best dog, pretty much. And maybe someday I'll be able to get myself back out there and get a new dog. But at this point, I already have other dogs to take care of and focus my attention towards. And I'm also just not ready to be a pet owner again at the moment. I feel like not that it would be disrespectful in his memory, I guess. I just kind of thought, maybe it's best to leave a bit of space just in his memory, before I take on a new responsibility. I want to like get myself together before I try to even approach being a pet owner again. But he's shown me a lot, that little dog, and I will always love him, and I will always appreciate all the moments that he was there for me, and I can only hope that I did enough for him before he went. I guess that's it. I'm running out of time here anyway. So, if you made it this far, I appreciate you for taking the time to listen. I know I was kind of rambly and I droned on, and there was a point where I just stopped talking altogether. But I wanted to get my point across and say something before I forgot. I know at some point I will compile all these thoughts in a much more sleek and edited video, because I wanna honor him in some way. This dog means a lot to me, more than anyone might even know, and I wanna be able to honor him in some way that I can think is appropriate. But for now, this is what we get, and thank you so much for watching. I promise not all of my content going forward, I promise not all of it will be about my dog. There will be a lot, but for now, bear with it, and I promise I'll have something that is not about Charlie. But the wound is still fresh, and I need time to I need time to reconcile that. So until then, again, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe, take care, and peace out. Bye-bye.